been made available to the public and the press. Can we do a roll call for attendance, please, Mr. Priest?
Sure. Mr. Walker?
Present.
Mr. Day?
Here.
Mrs. Strappi?
Here.
Mrs. Prisco?
Here.
Mrs. Fletcher?
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
And I just want to point out in the meeting notice, we changed from the consent agenda format as discussed. So when we do the voting on the resolutions, we have it broken down into our buckets to coordinate and be consistent with our committee groups. So just to note that for everybody. And now I will turn it to Mrs. Di Giuseppe for the superintendent's report.
Good evening. The bulk of my report tonight is going to be the standardized assessment presentation that Dr. Miller, Mrs. Peter, and Mr. Stevenson are here tonight to present. But I do want to just mention a couple of things before we move into that. We had a successful Ed Camp professional development today with our staff. And one of the reasons it was as successful as it was is that we had 26 different sessions that were presented by our staff members, and just wanted to give them a shout out and thank them for the work they did to provide the professional learning for their colleagues. So just bear with me as I go through the list of our contributors today. Claire Duffy and Heather Anderson, Jen Kleinecht, Bridget Sullivan, Lou Wabel, Steve Munoz, Eric Lynch, Melissa Wallerstein, Megan Pellegrino, Karen Tully, Max Morden, Janice DeFaro, Brian Goldsman, Amy Heckel, Abby Whelan, Michelle Mastardo, Paul Salvierno, Nicole Casalbuona, Eltion Bilage, Bilal Gang, and Elnor Zakiri, Tamara Jasario, Matt Rosa, Brian Michalowski, thank you. Julia Peter, Chris Tamburo, Nicole Studo, and Lisa Variolo. Thank you so much for the work that you did today to make the Professional Development Day a success for the rest of our staff. For next month's meeting, we'll have the AP presentation as well, featuring some students. And I will also be presenting to the board the 4 consultants that I researched with regard to strategic planning, as well as the demographic report, not the report, but the firm that's going to be doing the demographic report. And so the board knows I will also have for you the report from my 100-day plan at that time as well, the 100-day entry plan. And as Mrs. Fresky mentioned, just everybody, if we could just be patient with the new format of the agenda. It'll be a little clunky and bumpy at first until we get it worked out. But ultimately, we hope it will be a much clearer presentation of our resolutions. So thank you very much.
Can I ask a question about that? So with the strategic planning cost, like you've led strategic planning sessions, facilitated it. Lisa has, and I have, right? What's the impetus for us to pay someone else when we have at least half the board that has experience going through this process?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually, sorry about that. I've not led one on my own. I work with school boards, which, I mean, I'll say the punchline for next month, but they are significantly less expensive. We're talking, $15,000 less expensive than any of the other firms. I think the benefit for us is the community engagement and the moderating that occurs among the community staff and board and whoever's involved in it. Just keeping it on an even keel, because I've been involved in 2, one with Hazard Young and Atia, which had a very large number of people. And it took, I would say, probably 6 hours to come up with a mission statement that was 1 line. And so with school boards, they know how to keep it moving, keep it going, and kind of moderate. There is some heated discussion amongst, as you know, you've taken part in strategic planning. The bulk of and I'll go more into this next month, but or at the end of the month, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
If I could jump in
Yeah, sure.
with school boards, if we do that, the 3D design
Right.
model,
Yeah,
that's like $6,000 soup to nuts.
Yeah,
And
for
to me, I think I could justify that as an allowable expense. I think if we go anything higher than that, then I think it's with the level of experience that we have, I think it's unjustified. But if we do school board 3D model, I can get behind that.
and that's what I used in my last strategic plan. And the interesting thing about that is they help with the community engagement and the actual planning. But the action plan, all of that goes into how you're going to roll out the strategic plan, how you're going to measure your strategic plan, that's all in-house. Which is what you're paying for with the other companies that are much more expensive.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. And that's what I was going to say, that the bulk of the work when you use school boards is done in-house.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
No, I'll save that discussion for the next
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, and thank you, Chris, for bringing that up, because I think it's important for us to hear, all of what each facilitator might offer us, but also keeping in mind the cost, because we do have some people who have participated in it, but the ones that I participated in within Verona, there was so much community engagement that the first couple of meetings had over 100 people. So to manage that with a professional person, whether it's school boards or another organization, really kept the momentum moving, kept people on track. And they didn't have a vested interest of, because they're not your friends and neighbors that you're saying like, okay, we need to wrap this up and move on. So there's some value, but I agree of like listening to all the bids and keeping it the most cost effective as we can.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I wanted to add too is that the feedback that I have received from the public regarding the last round of strategic planning is that there is a perception that a lot was offered from the public and very little of it was actually taken into consideration. I'm not saying that's what happened. That's just the perception that I've heard. So I really think having a third-party person who is only invested in the process, right, not necessarily the outcome, I think is really important to make sure every voices are heard and valued and input is gathered, evenly across the board. How we spend that money, I think, is an
Yeah.
equally important,
And in the
idea.
past, again, the ones that I participated in Verona, the board members that were in attendance for it were there actually more for observing and listening and had very little input because it should be from the community. This is what we're listening to and the direction that the community wants to go in. And it's up to the district then to take those plans and move it forward.
I just wanted to add, so I can play ping pong with you guys. The way I got involved with the board, one of the reasons why I got involved with the town was I went to join the strategic planning committee for finance, and that's where I met John Quattrochi and I met the team and met all these people, and it got me engaged and excited about the schools and what we're doing. And then I ended up running for the school board. So I look forward to getting public participation. I felt I was, they listened to what I said and added, to my feedback to the decisions that were made. So, hopefully we'll get, I know in Verona, we have a very engaged community and look forward to getting this thing moving, and hopefully we line up the correct people to help guide us. So thanks.
Jim, don't play ping pong when you can play pickleball because it's 10 times better. But Reese, what we're talking about, just for your notes, is our district's looking to make a set of either 3 or 4 or 5 goals that are going to be our long-term planning goals, 3 or 4 or 5 year kind of goals. And what we're going to look to do is when we evaluate the superintendent each year, we're going to see her progress on each of those 5 goals. So that's why this is such an important conversation that we're having right now.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that because I'm coming in, so I'm seeing how all this works for the first time this year.
And with that, it was the perfect intro because you are next on our agenda, the student representative, Ms. Reese Sahado.
All right, thank you so much. And to start off with, I know last meeting, Ms. Drappi brought up like the idea of a student-led diversity, equity, inclusion group based on like a report seen at a professional development event. So this week I've been like working on like reaching out to students, different clubs that already have that sort of focus, Girls Learn International, Student Council, and GSA, and like trying to set up meetings and times where I can actually talk and have discussions with people there. And through that, I also like, first time I heard of it, the Multicultural Inclusion and Accessibility Advisory Council, Misty Giuseppe, I know you're on that. So they got their last meeting on the 30th. I'm definitely going to be there, and then the committee dissolves. But I'd love to get in touch and see like what the town's doing and how the schools can complement that approach, their approach so far. Also in the past few weeks, just for myself, Mr. Balaj like took me on a tour through the school's IT department, how security, Chromebooks, the hardware, how it all works, what their role within the district is. And it was really informative seeing how small an operation it is, but the really wide breadth of resources and services that they cover and provide, and the efficiency with which they do that was incredibly impressive. On the student level this week, student council, like they hosted the Spirit Week at VHS, ran from Halloween all through that week, started with like dress up, costume parade, and like different dress up themes and stuff for every day. Student participation, I wasn't able to get stats on this, it slipped my mind, but from my homeroom I remembered was roughly 1 in 2, 1 in 3 most days. And then hallway decoration on Thursday night, so just some student events there. In the LC, Miss Kelly, the new librarian, hired this year, as you guys know, was she's setting up a writing center with Dr. Meyer, an English teacher at VHS. So it's basically an opportunity for upperclassmen to tutor underclassmen, help them improve their essays, peer-to-peer critique, especially coming out of COVID and like where you don't really have that great a chance to have that one-on-one engagement and review with other students. Also gives upperclassmen tutoring hours and that sort of thing. So it's really targeting an area affected during the pandemic and creating a solution that benefits students on both ends of the equation there. In terms of sports, football season wrapped up last week. Sadly, they didn't advance through the next round. But last night, VHS girls volleyball won 2-0 against Rutherford. So that was state sectionals for them. And lastly, next week, just because we don't have a meeting in between now and then, is Verona High School's fall play, Romeo and Juliet this year. So that's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah. And if there's any questions about anything in there.
We picked Verona because of Romeo and Juliet. Was there any correlation there?
I don't know.
And that's this coming up weekend, you said? Thursday,
Next
Friday?
week.
Next weekend, yeah, after teachers convention.
After teachers. Great. All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions regarding that?
I do not have any questions, but it is so enjoyable listening to you report out in such an eloquent, concise manner, and I have a lot to learn. So thank you.
See, I'm thinking there's going to be another board seat open next November if you're 18. Put your name in. Moving along with our regular agenda, we do have a presentation tonight. We have Dr. Miller, the Director of Curriculum, Ms. Julia Peter, the Supervisor of Humanities, and Mr. Glenn Stevenson is our STEM Supervisor. So you can take it away. Thank you.
Good evening. It is our honor to present the NJSLA NJGPA results for last spring. We begin with our mission statement. In partnership with the supportive community, we inspire our students to be creative, critical thinkers, and compassionate global citizens through dynamic teaching, meaningful curricula, and enriching experiences. Took us about 6 hours to come up with this strategic planning. We have 6 strategies. We will highlight 3. So strategy 2, uphold a healthy and respectful school culture consistent with our core values. And we list the first 3 results. Nurture and cultivate critical thinkers to establish a community that raises resilient students. Integrate experiences that value diversity, promote cultural understanding, and consider multiple perspectives. And 3, cultivate an inclusive environment and provide opportunities for social and emotional learning. Strategy 4 deals with engaging curriculum with meaningful experiences. We have 5 results. I won't read all of them, but it really talks about how we try to keep our curriculum fresh, how we're trying to integrate literacy, STEM-based activities across the curriculum. Strategy 5 is meaningful professional development. And I think I'm a little biased, but I think no one does it better than we do. We focus on all of our core subjects and more every year with experts, along with what our supervision team has behind me. And we really think we promote stronger, deeper student learning as a result with professional development for our teachers. Our teachers need to keep learning in order to, keep becoming better with instruction and planning. All right, just a brief review. In 2014, there was something that was called PARC that drew a lot of attention. I remember especially being in the high school cafeteria and meeting 100, 200 parents explaining what PARC was. It has evolved to the NJSLA, and we did have a 2-year gap because of COVID where we did not have standardized tests. There were some celebrations in the streets for some. And English language arts has been reduced. So with NJSLA, it's grades 3 through 9. It's the same thing with math, grades 3 through 9. Difference between PARC and NJSLA: PARC was long. PARC initially was in April and then in May. It was excessive. So through a lot of parent, teacher, administrator feedback, it was reduced for all sections. How is it scored? It's important to understand the score. So it's has 5 performance levels from 650 on the left to 850. So it goes levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. 4, 5 are considered passing. And generally, a passing score for all the grades is 750. And 5, it depends. We'll begin with language arts. Mrs. Peter, please come up.
Thank you. I think this is a really nice opportunity to celebrate our teachers, our families, and most importantly, our students that overcame so much in the last few years. This is a testament to their hard work, to their flexibility and perseverance, and I think that's important to consider as we review any test results, but particularly in the last couple of years, the teachers and students, and especially our families, have overcome a lot. You will notice on these slides, achievement level there at the top. So those are the 5 areas that Dr. Miller just reviewed. Scores 4 and 5, which has met and exceeded expectations, are combined into one green tab there. You'll see a gap in 2020 and 2021. Those are the 2 years in which we did not participate in standardized testing due to the COVID pandemic. And you'll notice the shift between PARC and NJSLA between 2018 and 2019. So here we begin with our 3rd grade ELA results. And our 4th grade ELA results, you'll notice a dip in our performance due to the impacts of the pandemic, but overall about 80% of our 3rd and 4th graders approached, met, or exceeded expectations in spite of the pandemic. You'll notice here on this slide, our disaggregated results. The results are arranged by gender, race, socioeconomic status, and program. Here in grade 3, and again in grade 4. Our teachers have been working hard despite the pandemic to find areas for growth and improvement in ELA in our elementary schools. Our teachers are continuing to follow our foundation scope and sequence, and we've integrated Haggerty, which is a phonemic awareness program to support our students in K and 1. We have a word study program in grade 4. We also used the DRA2 assessment and Acadience, which was formerly DIBBLS, to assess student learning of reading. DIBBLS was always used across grade 1. We've introduced DIBBLS in kindergarten as well. We also have almost 30 teachers who are participating in letters training with Miss Claire Duffy, and I wanted to take a moment to celebrate those teachers. It's an incredible commitment. As I also inch my way through the program, it is a 2-year program. It takes an incredible amount of time and dedication outside of the school day to complete. It is the program LETTERS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, and it focuses on ways that we can integrate phonics phonemic awareness into our balanced literacy program. It's an incredible program. I've learned so much myself, and I know in conversations with teachers, it's really changing our practice. We continue our balanced literacy training with Miss Dana Clark and Miss Nicole Studo at Brookdale. Our principals and supervisors continue to review NJSLA data with our grade level teachers, including the school evidence statement analysis and digital item library that gives the teachers a peek at which particular areas in ELA our students are succeeding and where we have room for growth. And we continue to analyze MAP growth assessments and Adventum Exact Path as a tool to take that information, that data, and put it into practice. Here we'll take a look at our middle school data. Here in grade 5, we also see the impact of the pandemic. These students have never taken the NJSLA assessment before.
Real quick.
Sure.
So I could be wrong, but I thought only scores that are 4 or 5 are passing scores. Did they change that?
Nope, that's correct. We figure that, and really the data is showing us that some of our students who were in the 4 and 5 range previously have slipped into that 3 range. Those are the students on the cusp, and those are the students that we target in our tier 1 instruction to move back into that 4 or 5
But with
range.
this data here, the kids that are I guess the green or the passing, is that
Correct.
the kids got 4 and 5 or 3, 4 and 5?
4 and 5.
4 and 5, very good thing.
Here we have our 6th grade results with nearly 87% of our students scoring in level 3, 4, and 5. You'll see 54.5 or just in that 4 or 5 range. That's the difference between the yellow and green. Yep. And that's compared to 90% or so pre-pandemic. Here we have our 7th grade results. And our 8th grade results, we do see a dip in performance across our middle school grades, but we don't see a sharp decline. And a dip is an opportunity for our teachers to hone in on tier 1 and 2 instruction to move towards continued growth next year. Here again are our disaggregated results, which are organized by gender, race, socioeconomic status, and program in grade 5. In grade 6, in grade 7, and in grade 8. Disaggregated results are important. It helps us, as a supervisory team to look at our data with a lens towards equity, to make sure that the programs that we're putting in place, the interventions we're putting in place, support all students. At our middle school, we are working, Glenn and I, alongside our HBW co-principals and many of our teachers to bolster the 2-tier intervention available to our middle school students, and to help our middle school teachers take the data that's now at their fingertips, our NJSLA data combined with our Start Strong and Math Growth data to inform their instruction. I think what's important to remember is that this is just one measure, our NJSLA data. We also have Start Strong and Math data, plus informal classroom assessments and our benchmark assessments in classrooms to help us inform where we're going next and how we can move students forward. We also have many teachers, not just at our elementary schools participating in letters, but some middle school teachers as well. We're continuing our balanced literacy training with Ms. Clark and working hard in department meetings to review our NJSLA data along with MAP and Start Strong data. Here we take a look at our grade 9 results at VHS. And our grade 9 results disaggregated by gender, race, socioeconomic status, and program. At the high school, we also continue to review NJSLA and Start Strong data with our departments to identify areas of strength and areas for growth. We continue to look more closely at the particular items that identify areas where our students are doing well and where they struggle. Reese highlighted one of the steps that Mr. Cogdill has taken to address some areas of need in our writing programs. With the implementation of our new writing center, we're very excited about that. We also have a teacher-led professional learning community that Mr. Cogdill has supported during faculty meeting time to bolster narrative writing instruction, specifically in grades 9 and 10. And here we have a graph of our scaled scores compared to the New Jersey averages. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our STEM set. Thank you, Peter. Peter. NOS. NOS. I'm sorry.
NOS. Let's see if we can make that tall enough.
Oh, sorry.
Good evening. Good to see everybody. Thanks for having me here. I feel like I benefit from being the number 3 hitter and following these two. They were much more eloquent in their introductions than I would have been, so I'll take that. Thank you. We'll run. I've been advised to click like the wind, right? So we'll do some data by fire hose, so to speak, right? Here's our 3rd grade math. And again, there's a little bit, I hate the term learning loss. I think of this as learning lag, because they didn't lose anything, they just didn't get everything. And again, we're comparing our 3, 4, and 5 scores to each other, because we saw a little bit of a dip, but we think we can get those kids back fairly quickly, especially since we're back in school in a more normal scenario now. Here's 4th grade. I added one little thing from one of the reports that we get. This is the 3rd grade, and I'll direct you to the right side where it's looking at reasoning and modeling. This would have been the 3rd year of Dimensions Math in 3rd grade. The program is focused on learning through problem solving and students like taking different strategies and discussing amongst one another. It's really about mathematical reasoning and modeling. And I think this little chart shows that we're doing well in those areas. And I look to see this continue through the years as we track this particular group of kids through Verona Public Schools. Disaggregated results for both 3rd and 4th. I think it's interesting to note on 4th, like typically we think about some stereotypes in STEM and stereotypes in humanities and what happens in the gender differences. 3rd looks like it supports the stereotypes. 4th, though, looks like the data is against those gender stereotypes. And I kind of want to track this as they move through Verona Public Schools and what is it that we have going on right there. We've worked a lot with Dimensions Math and the focus on making kids confident in math, making kids able to reason with math, not just solve problems and get answers. We're going to continue that. We've been encouraging teachers to make math fun by making the practice days kind of focus on games and like let math be playful. So many times math just feels like get an answer, get an answer, get an answer. We've hired a math coach, although she's been a little bit sidelined, as you all know, teaching 1st grade for a bit there at FNB. We want to get her back to being our math coach and supporting, at least at first, our kindergarten teachers who have their 1st year of Dimensions Math and the folks who are new to our district and help them understand kind of our mission and philosophy around math. We'll continue to do PD with Bill Jackson, myself, Dr. Miller is a former math teacher. That's one of his favorite things. And we've been looking through the other sources of data, and actually our map growth assessments have been helpful because we can target with a little more frequency. And since that's an adaptive test, we get a better read on students than we do. NJSLA tends to be like an after the fact assessment. Continuing, this is HB 5th grade, HB 6th grade, HB 7th grade. The one thing I want to point out on this set of data is the fact that we were down a 7th grade teacher in math last year, and we had our other teachers chipping in with a 6th section. I think what we can see right there is actually pretty remarkable considering the trials and tribulations that went into 7th grade math last year. 8th grade math. Again, 8th grade math is always interesting because we have some of the kids not sitting in 8th grade math, but sitting in algebra in 8th grade math. They take a different test, and so those kids aren't represented in this set of data. And speaking of those kids in HB and algebra, here they are. And then last year we had geometry at HB. Our disaggregated results. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. The algebra disaggregated is on another side because it's combined with Verona High School. This year we're implementing Dimensions Math for our 2nd year at 5th grade. We've adopted Amplify Math, which is a similar program. We had considered adopting Dimensions Math, but the 6, 7, and 8 program is very different than the K through 5 program. And we picked Amplify Math because it matched the philosophy that we've built at the elementary levels. Again, we're working to incorporate math games and fluency practice, and we're working on a plan to bolster our tier 2 interventions. We'll continue PD either with Amplify or Bill Jackson, myself, Dr. Miller. We've been reviewing the various NJSLA details that they've given us in department meetings and whatnot. Here's the high school, Algebra 1. One of the differences with NJSLA this year, as in years past, is we only tested 9th grade. So this is a fair comparison for Algebra 1. That's the bulk of our freshmen. This next slide, which is geometry, notice the sample size. In 2019, it was 151 students, right? So that was all of our honors geometry freshmen and all of our 10th grade CP geometry students. Last year, we only tested in 9th grade, so that was our honors geometry students only. Those sophomores aren't represented in the data whatsoever. We didn't test the 10th grade. That wasn't part of the requirement from the state. Likewise, on the next chart with Algebra 2, 2019, 142 students, 2022, 19 students. Really hard to compare those, very different sample sizes. Disaggregated for Algebra 1, geometry, and Algebra 2. And again, that represents all of our freshmen in the math classes last year. What we're working on in math at the high school, we're implementing Algebra 1 and we're piloting Algebra 2 through Amplify. Again, this is a problem, teaching through problem solving, students making sense of math, making mathematical arguments, working on reasoning in math. We've begun to do PD within the department with a lesson study structure that we learned with Bill Jackson, and they're kind of taking it on themselves. We spent most of last year and continuing this year focusing on the 5 practices for orchestrating mathematical, productive mathematical discussions. And that's been really the focus of presenting math in that way in the classroom.
You want to share the quick story with Ms. Mylan that she had simplified and tried traditional?
Yeah, interesting. Ms. Hyland taught Algebra 1 last year, and we used some of the amplified units as kind of a test. And she got to a piece of the curriculum that didn't have an amplified component. And honestly, we think that piece of the curriculum was there because it was in other algebra books, but really wasn't in the Common Core, and it's kind of a bit of an eye-opener. And she found when she went from the amplified lessons back to something that was like traditional chalk and talk math, the kids were like, Miss Highland, can we go to those other lessons again? Like, here's our kids who've gotten through school, have never had that strong math identity. They were actually enjoying math class and didn't like the traditional math anymore. Because they had a chance to get out of their seats, they had a chance to discuss, they had a chance to argue, they had a chance to solve problems their way, see other students' ways. And that was really kind of an eye-opener, both for Ms. Highland and me and Dr. Miller and really everybody involved. Just a little anecdote. Here is our kind of range of math scores, Verona versus the state. Dr. Miller picked maroon for Verona. I'm not sure where that came from, but Quickly, science. Science is tested with NJSLA at 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. This is Verona versus the state. Again, you get the color code.
Mr. Stevens, is this still the second or third field test for the science? Second?
Second. The first one was in 2019. So we tested it. We took a few years off of testing it again. We included this because it illustrates the buckets that they look at in science. There's earth and space, life science, physical science is the content. And then in terms of skills, there's investigating, sense making, and critiquing. Here's the disaggregated science. It's interesting to point out that science is on a 4-point scale where math and ELA is on a 5-point scale. I'll let you draw your own conclusion. Here's 8th grade science. That same set of buckets, earth, life, physical, investigating, sense making, and critiquing. And Mardi Gras colors this time, right? Fancy. And you didn't pick those. Now the state picked the Mardi Gras colors. Yeah. Dr. Miller picked these colors. Okay. And now here's 11th grade science. Verona versus the state. Here's the Mardi Gras chart. I'm sorry. Too irreverent, right? And then the disaggregated science results. What we're working on here that I didn't put it on the slide, I apologize. There's the 5 practices for science that lines up with the 5 practices for math. We've been talking about that in department meetings. The other challenge with science is including phenomenon first instruction, which is kind of difficult and very different than any of us ever learned in, where you kind of present some phenomenon either through photograph, video, actual investigation, try to get kids to make sense of that and then formalize their understanding or begin a student-centered investigation where they're asking their own questions and then investigating them. I was actually doing an observation the past 2 days and we were talking about phenomenon first and what we could do with that related to mitosis and onion root tips, which sounds fascinating, right? But there's things that we can learn and kind of figure out there. And then the test is provided through Measurement Inc. We have a small sample of test questions. I would love if the state is listening right now, please give us more samples so that we understand what
They're not.
What's that? I know, just in case, yeah, just in case. Now, we've reached the halfway point of our presentation. Okay, we're at the tail end. I'm gonna bring Dr. Miller back on.
Yeah, so wrapping up.
Stand-up version.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to.
If you remember, and I forget the year, but HESPA was a 4-letter word that was used at the high school for juniors. Yeah, and we went away from that with Park. And we tested students through 11th grade, and then we started pulling back. And then the state said, well, we're missing something in junior year. So let's have the NJGPA.
Some court cases
Test.
involved in that.
Yeah, there's a lot of litigation involved there, especially for districts where not a lot of kids would pass it. So last spring, our students took the first test of the NJGPA. It's a pilot. It's a pilot this year as well, this upcoming spring. It's in ELA, and juniors take this test, and it's based on the grade 10 standards. So they take it after they finish 10th grade. And it's the same with math. They do algebra 1 and geometry because most students are completed with algebra and geometry by the end of their 10th grade. So we administered this last spring. It was administered in March. And it didn't run into our spring break, which was nice. They gave us a 2-week window. The whole state had a 2-week window. So here are the results. I broke it down more. Originally, it just says either they graduate or they don't. So I tried to break it down to look a little more like what we see with NJSLA. I did 4 different scales. So from minimal understanding to the left, to partial, to appropriate, and then to advanced. It's interesting. I mean, the results speak for themselves. Most of our students took this. We did have some students not take this. This is the first time they took this. If you took a look at ELA 9, we did extremely well. So when you look at the ELA and you don't see the same results, it makes you really think. Our ELA results are really strong in grade 9. So I don't think this is indicative of what our students are capable of doing. And I think I have a lot of backing with that. It is. So I think the reason why they're not counting it is because they're just trying to field test this and trying to figure it out. We know the state has to follow certain things because they also have to answer to the federal government. That's why we're taking this. And then we have the ELA results. And this is what we received. It either says not yet graduation ready or graduation ready. That's all it says. And based on, again, grade 10 ELA, what they learned. So we are a little bit above the state average for graduation ready. And then when we go to the disaggregated results.
Dr. Miller, can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure.
The other piece that's important to note here is we also get college and career readiness from our PSATs, which show a much greater percentage of our students that are actually ready for college and career.
Yeah, they do. We asked this years ago as districts if we could just use the PSAT. We administered to our students in 9th and 10th grade. We could just use that as graduation requirements, and we were told no. Sometimes common sense isn't so common. So again, when we look at ELA, our females do outscore our males for being graduation ready. And then we'll move into math. And again, I broke it down so it's a little more understandable. So we have minimal understanding, only 2%, 2.7% of our students. Get to partial understanding, it's 43%. Appropriate, 42.9, and advanced is around 11%. And when we go to how we are versus the state, we are stronger. I think we'll be much stronger as we work out the kinks and as we continue to work with Amplify Math at the middle school and high school with our students that are learning dimensions math. I just think, I said it would be a 10-year growth spurt, and it's getting there. And the kids in the middle school now in 5th grade and moving into 6th, once we get through the growing pains, they're just going to soar. If you recall the results from Mr. Stevenson, our grade 3 and 4 students are doing extremely well, and they've only had a couple of years of this. So this is really about confidence, especially with math. Most parents that I meet do not have nice words to say about math. So they don't. And our kids are listening. The NJGPA for the math disaggregated results, if you look at the male and female, it's a dead heat. They're the same for those that are graduation ready. And this is just more information if you're interested to find about NJSLA, as well as, when this was rolled out in 2011, the Common Core. And I think I can't click anymore, so we're finished. So are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, you did great.
Thank you.
This is going to be uploaded to our website, so you can
Yes.
kind of look at it more closely.
I have one question. So I get the sense, the firm sense that Miss Peter, who's Charlie's awesome teacher, by the way, and Mr. Stevenson, they're really living in this particular, their respective sets of data, right? And I get the also feeling that they're kind of like the connector between the students and then the teachers and these data points. Now, this board is gonna, in the next couple of months, have to vote yes or no to a strategic plan, a long-term strategic plan that our superintendent presents to us. We know that one of these things that we have to see on this plan is going to be some kind of academic growth indicator. I don't need this answer tonight, but I'd be very, very, very interested before we start that process to get it right from Ms. Peter and Mr. Stevens's mouth, what their recommendation would be as to, do they think that these are the data points we should use as metrics to gauge student achievement and student improvement? Or is it benchmark data, or is it some other formative or summative assessment? Because I think I don't know the answer, but I get to see, there's flaws to this data because of COVID, right? But we want to get our goal to be the most reliable indicator of student growth, because this is going to be something that we use big time in the next 5 years. So I'd be very interested before we start that progress, just to hear your professional opinion, both of you. I can't see Mr. Steven now, but I'd be very interested in hearing your professional opinion on that question.
Yeah, I think I can speak for both of them. For our elementary and middle school, it would be the MAP growth. It's a growth-oriented test. It's not timed. And it actually measures students above or below grade level where, it's even reported incorrectly. Like when we compare sixth graders to sixth graders the next year, they're not the same students. It's like a growth model makes sense, especially if you want to see progress. And it's sifting through that and finding where the areas of need are versus the areas of strength, and letting teachers know that, and then they differentiate in the classroom. And probably the most important thing are the assessments that the teachers get, formative and summative. So what do they learn every day through feedback? And then what are they doing for like unit tests? We design those through in our what's called stage 2 for understanding by design. So that's number one. Number two would be like a MAP growth assessment, because that tells us a lot of information about especially our students. I mean, the reason why we present grades 3 through 8 is because they're like early warning detection signals so they get to the high school. I learned that as assistant principal in 2005 in Rutherford, and they added 5, 6, and 7 my first year there. They're like, oh, we're testing not just 4 and 8, because it used to be the GEPA, the ESPA, and the GEPA. Then I was at a 4-8 school. I'm like, so my office was like just piles of papers and books, and they were meant to be like check-ins. How are we doing? How do we inform our instructors? So when they get to the high school, majority of the students pass an assessment that's administered to them. But the daily instruction is the most important thing, the feedback from the kids, reflection from the teacher, plannings with the teachers, and then, letting kids take assessments, allowing them to make corrections on assessments. Learning is cumulative. So we try to stress with all of our staff that even though you make an assessment, and we have some arguments, well, it took a long time making this test, well, you need to make another one. Like, not every kid learns by Wednesday. Sometimes they need more time. Sometimes they need to take it again. And that's how we learn in life. So
I think and I agree. And I think that to the point you're making, where not all grade levels has to have the same, assessment as the metric that we use. I think that's valid. And I would just ask our superintendent to consider when we make that part of the strategic planning. I think we have 2 really valuable resources here that we want in the room with us.
I'd like to
Absolutely.
ask a follow-up question, and thank you for that great segue into the question about MAP growth in particular. So when this board first approved MAP growth back in 2020, I think is when you first presented it to myself and at the time, Mr. Allworth, during Ed Committee, and sort of sold it to us as a worthy investment, and it was a hefty investment. And then followed by the Edmonton Pathways software, which correlates with that and allows for immediate interventions or enrichment based on their performance on the growth assessments throughout the year. And I also understand, and as I have reported out in the committee, that part, but not the reason we're giving the MAP growth, but one of the outcomes that we're seeing with MAP growth, as you've reported also, is that it is showing to be a predictor of our NJSLA scores, and therefore can be used as one of the arguments to the state as they reconsider their renewal of the NJSLA test, that this may be an opportunity for us to opt out of the NJSLA and use a growth model assessment, if you will. How well were you able to predict these outcomes based on our MAP growth that we've done in the past 2 years?
Yeah, sure. So when we received our NJSLA results this summer, there's a linking study that we have, but we did our own Verona study, and the correlation was as high as 90% of what and the MAP, how it predicts the NJSLA. And again, I will stress the reason why, and I've said this to the state, we help run the county roundtable for curriculum instruction. Choose a growth model because that's what we should be focused on, and it's not timed. The NJSLA is timed and it's grade level. So we have students who we know are below grade level. We're trying to catch them up. It's not easy. Why don't we assess them? I've asked this since I've been a teacher. Why don't we assess them where they are and show growth? I think it's really hard for students who are struggling below grade level and they don't pass. And it's like, well, no kidding. Like but we're trying to get them there. So it's always hard for a special education teacher, especially the students taking a 4th grade assessment, but they're at 2nd grade reading level. It's really hard to bridge that gap. So that comes with programming and reflection. But again, maybe we even asked for the Start Strong. I know Ms. Giuseppe, you asked along with other superintendents in the Garden State Coalition of Schools, could we use, in our case, MAP growth instead of Start Strong? And we were told no. But we should have been allowed to use the MAP growth. So we had to push back our MAP growth dates to accommodate Start Strong. And there's nothing wrong with Start Strong. It's just that MAP's just more informative.
Right. And that sort of leads me to my next question is the NJ, well, I mean, you all know I'm a special education teacher, so NJSLA is a massive thorn in my side every year. And every year it is an emotional time for me. So with the NJ GPA though, I mean, when we're looking at our math scores, 94% of our students with IEPs were not graduation ready. So what is the state saying for these students with IEPs that next year, if we're not going to pilot again, and this is a requirement, these kids just don't get, like, I don't understand what where the rationale is there.
Yeah, so I think there is, again, we should use PSAT, we should have local control. And I don't mind the ELA and the Math 9, if you will. That should be that. And then it's in the state law that they have from a long time ago that they had to have a 11th grade assessment. Very few states have these anymore. Again, should be trusting more local. I think they're going to be continuing to call it a pilot. It's kind of like science. Science results have never been great. They were really good in the beginning because you only get 1/3 of the questions correct to pass. So when they determine the cut scores, that says a lot about the assessment. I think GPA will field test again it's supposed to go in effect for our juniors. Here's for you for next year. I'm not so sure that if the results aren't strong enough, they will probably do another field.
The ACLU is fighting GPA's administration because the vast majority of students, whether they're IEP students or not in the urban areas, are not able to pass the test. Right. So, and I understand and I agree with local control. I don't see it happening, unfortunately. I think the state's going to continue with the idea that we're testing, everyone all the time. I agree. We need to do better benchmarks. We're required to present on NJSLA, which is why we do.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have plenty of opportunities to assess where our kids are internally.
In case your parent listening at home and your child was in this position where they're not high school ready. It's not a real high stakes testing. It's a quasi high stakes testing. The appeals process is designed to make sure that the kids are going to get through so long as they at least put some effort into it. Yeah, we also, not at this meeting, but I'm sure at a future meeting, we're going to look at the populated CUSAC scores for with these results in them, and we should be able to see, at least in some target groups, the expectation of growth or how far we're exceeding expectations with certain groups. So we'll get some data there. But I like the fact that our board's not solely committed to this data as a metric that we're married to.
Now, this is the data that winds up on things, those, niche rating scales that, real estate uses to sell homes. And the bottom line is these are a snapshot a day or two in the life of a child. And they're not great tests. I mean, initially, they used to tell us, ask, GEPA, ask all of those tests, don't look at them vertically because we don't test the same standards every year. And then Park came out and they were going to say, well, now the standards are Common Core, which is now NJ, SLA, SLS. They're now aligned. Well, they are, but they don't test the same standards every year. So when you're, like what Dr. Miller was saying, when you're looking at sixth grade to sixth grade, those are two different groups of kids, right? So you really want to look at sixth grade to seventh grade. Only you can't because the same standards aren't tested on the sixth grade test and the seventh grade test. Then take it one step further. Well, I know they're not doing algebra to geometry anymore, but there's no correlation there either. So it makes it really hard to use these assessments to really make any informed decisions other than this is what gets in the newspaper.
I just have a quick question regarding when you're talking about the test for graduation readiness, and it would be great to use the PSAT, but we can't. I think when Mrs. Prisco and I were at the Army Educator Tour, they were talking about I pulled it up here, wait a second. The ASVAB. That's no longer acceptable, because I was going to ask, do any of our students take that? So it's for, anybody who doesn't understand what it is, it's more of a test that will give career readiness, and it assesses your abilities, and it almost gives you more information on not only practical knowledge that you have, but where interests lie and where you might be most successful. Is that not a viable
No,
test
the
anymore?
state went to alternate pathways for graduation requirements in the transition from Common Core to NJSLA. And they've since done away with all of that. And the reason for that, let's be honest, is they weren't following the law. Right. So the federal government gave us a lot of money over the years, and we have a requirement under the Every Student Succeeds Act to follow that act. And that act says you have to test in grades once in elementary, once in middle, and once in high school. And grade 11 is that test. And former Commissioner of Education decided to go off on his own and adopt Common Core in Park, and didn't read the law and got slammed on it. And now we're back to a really bad test. It's really all wrapped around Every Student Succeeds and the money that the government, and for districts like Verona, that doesn't get much money from the federal government. It really doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's what we have. And we have to live with it.
Point, Lisa, like I think I've been in high schools in a while, but like we still are legally required to give out any military test or anything like that. I think because we take the federal money. Is that still the case? At least offer that.
Like we have to provide recruiting to military, et cetera. The test that Mrs. Fresky was talking about was just an alternative test. So if you didn't hit the cut score on PSAT or SAT, you could take that. AccuPlacer was another one.
AccuPlacer was another one. There's a lot of them.
Are there any other questions or comments? So thank you, Chief,
Welcome.
for the presentation, for the information. Bravo.
Thank you. Stop.
So we're going to continue to move on with our regular agenda at this point. Up next, we have our committee reports and education, special education.
Yes, we met yesterday And it wasn't a very involved meeting. AP Presentation Scholar Awards will be next meeting, November 22nd, I believe is our next meeting. Map growth testing is completed. They're just finishing up makeups, and the information will be sent home in backpacks going forward because postage is super expensive. And tonight's NJSLA presentation. SGOs and PDPs have been uploaded. Dr. Miller is in the process of confirming them all. First rounds of observations are underway. Teachers received PD in balanced literacy letters, all focusing on phonemic awareness. They had their third mentor meeting will be coming up soon. Ms. Giuseppe mentioned the Ed Camp, which was today for PD. And essentially what that is that was our staff and faculty turnkeying a lot of information, and teachers had an opportunity to choose what they wanted to do or what they wanted to learn about. Very similar to our workshop model at board workshops. And I think that is incredibly valuable. On the agenda tonight, we talked about the extension or the leave of absences for social workers at FM Brown, the social worker for FM Brown Brookdale extension of the leave of absence for that, and for the replacement, excuse me, and in the process of looking for a leave of absence social worker for the HPW position, hopefully going on the November 22nd agenda. Curriculum Council met on the 19th. The next meeting will be in December. In the Ed Committee folder is the 2023-2024 program suggestions that came out of that Curriculum Council. And they will be further discussed at the next meeting and sort of vetted more carefully. December 5th through 9th is National Inclusion Week, and our DEI coordinator and facilitators have been had several meetings with Child, our parent group for students with learning differences. And they came up with a theme for every day of the week and specific programs for elementary, HBW, and VHS. And that sounds really great. And during the meeting, I had asked Dr. Miller if these are the sort of programs that we can just continue, that it doesn't just live in a week, that it should be year round, and to sort of measure the success of the programs, before the end of the new year, and see how we can implement something like this going forward, either monthly or twice monthly, or however they see fit. And he thought that that was a reasonable suggestion. That was it. It was a really short meeting. It really was. I know it was like the shortest meeting ever.
I'm gonna just jump in. Oh,
Yeah.
Did you have stuff to add to it?
I have nothing to add.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna jump in because you mentioned Curriculum Council, and I was able to hop on that call. So just a little preview. It was really exciting. First of all, to see all the teachers together, really collaborating and working on what they work on to present to our students. So first glimpse of some of the things that they were talking about for potential course proposals for the next year. In computer science, there's a game development course that they were discussing, which would closely relate math concepts and tangible connections to the real world. There was a history of math course that was discussed, a combination course that would go co-developed between art and math department. That sounds amazing. Ms. Peters and Ms. Ackerman talked about English selectives, which would be giving students a little bit more choice on courses that they take and the books that they read within their classes. There was talk within the technology department about robotics, a hands-on lab-based course that might be coming up. And there was talk about a music appreciation, which would be tracing the roots of American pop music. So it was really exciting. And, I look forward to seeing which of these come to fruition and, what makes it, and, student feedback on that. So it's great.
But yeah, just for the English selectives in particular, the teachers have already started like sending out surveys a couple of weeks ago in the English classes to like gauge interest. I haven't heard about the results of those surveys, but the course selections and offerings, it's a really interesting parallel, like half year course for standards-based English, and then very specialized, like some of the ones that they suggested as possible offerings, like philosophy and literature, classical monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein type stuff. So
Right, it sounded
very
really cool.
interesting.
And just to be on the call, because you get the energy and the enthusiasm of the teachers, and it made me want to go back to high school.
The only one I didn't hear you mention, and maybe I just missed it, because I got stuck on the English selective one, because I thought that was really cool too, was the introduction to music technology and product.
You know what, I had to drop off the
Oh,
call.
so
'cause
maybe
I had-
it was
I
the
actually
last
I was
slide
at
on
work,
here.
So I actually had a work meeting, so I had to drop off, so I didn't catch.
It was the
all of
last slide on here, and I think what's
Okay.
interesting about these course proposals is that a lot of them are sort of, first of all, a lot of them are for upperclassmen, but it really lends itself in college prep, right? Because this is what you're doing when you go to college. You're really taking much more focused courses in your interest. But I think there's also a lot of opportunities for career prep in these courses as well. You know, introduction to music technology and product. I mean, that's what my husband does for a living. And that sort of course would have really been beneficial to somebody like that, who is not looking to go to a 4-year college, but would like to go to a technical school.
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent opportunity.
So if there's no more questions or comments regarding the education committee, we will move on to athletics.
Thank you, Mrs. Freshy. Yes, so we met the other day, actually. Fall sports is wrapping up. Volleyball, as Ms. Reese, well, I'm not going to say your last name because I'll butcher it. So as Reese said, the volleyball won last night, and they are headed to Verona on Thursday evening to play for the next group, I guess it is, because we won the group one. We won the North 2 group 1. So then I think they're going to play Pagoda for the next group. And so congratulations to those girls as well. Everyone else is done with fall sports. We also spoke about the Positive Coaches Alliance. Mrs. Pomerezi is still trying to work up a date for that and going to see if we could get some funds available through professional development to fund that. Also, she's also working on some quotes for a field and gym sound system. So she's also looking into getting quotes and looking into some grants on that as well. Winter sports, ice hockey and swim will start on November 21st, and other sports will begin on November 28th. Field trips that are set so far, we have on January 7th, the French Club will be going to the Museum of Modern Art, and the 8th grade Pocono Valley trip is set for June 2nd. And Mrs. Pomerezi will be attending our December 13th meeting to present all the fall sports and their achievements. And she will be inviting the tennis team for their sectional win. And now also the volleyball team will be joining us. And also Andrew Boyle, who received the FFC Man of the Year Award, he will also be hopefully joining us that evening. And also I would like to congratulate Mr. Jonathan Ty, our tennis coach, as being coach of the year. So congratulations to him. And Mrs. Freshy, did I miss anything?
I'm sorry,
Oh.
you said the fall sports is at our first December meeting? Fall sports awards.
Yes, December
Okay.
13th. The other thing I wanted to also say is last night at the high school for the volleyball game, I came and the student section was unbelievable. It was just such a great vibe. It was so loud. It was really just a fun event to be at. Everyone was so excited. And I have to say, Coach Ryan from the volleyball team, he is just so calm. He's so calm, so calm. yeah, it was amazing. It was pretty interesting because just looking at the other coaches from the other team and seeing him, he's just got such a nice demeanor about him, and the girls really, really do well with him and the assistant. So congratulations to them. Thank you.
Just jump in too. I think our coaches are amazing. I really do think our coaches are amazing. I know that sometimes humans kind of get emotional, and they may lapse sometimes when they're coaching kids in high pressure situations. But as a reminder, that can't happen. They're representing Verona, and there's a standard that has to happen all the time in Verona. So I just want to make that point clear. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding athletics? If no, we're going to move on. Am I crazy or the community resources? Not me. We did not meet. Okay, so I'm thinking, did I have some kind of like total lapse? But we did have a policy meeting. So at our last meeting, if you recall, we formed an ad hoc governance policy committee that will go from now until our reorganization meeting in January to see if that's going to be adopted as a formal committee to move forward. But we did meet, so I will give it to Mrs. Drappi to report out on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Fresky. We met last night, which is why I was not at the volleyball game, unfortunately.
This was more fun. It was.
So first we discussed sort of the process of agenda creation and the order in which we'll be going through the policies. And we agreed that, it's best to go in order of our policy manual in number order, as well as any immediate concerns that are raised. So with that said, we encourage all board members to consistently review our policies and then recommend any changes or raise any concerns to the policy committee, and that will be and be added to, and then we can add that to our agenda as well. So the policies that we discussed, the first policy was 0144, and that I just want to sort of bring it up here. And the changes that we recommended to that were sort of limiting the amount of time that a new board member has to complete their new board member training. And the reasoning behind this was that there really is a significant lag time between when you're sworn in as a new board member and when you really sort of gain a deeper understanding as to board functions and how board meetings are run. And a lot of that is learned in the Governance 1 required training. So we had recommended completing the training before 90 days. The law currently only requires a full year. So we said that the language change should be the law requires until December 31st, that you have until December 31st to complete that training. However, it is encouraged that board members complete their training within the first 90 days. And it's really just, it's not a gotcha, right? It's more of an effort to make sure that new board members have as much information and tools in their toolbox to be active members of our board and have a really deeper understanding as soon as possible. We also wanted to add that language to complete the re-election training. So if you're re-elected, that you have to complete your training within 90 days. But again, that's also December 31st. So,
I was going to say, I just think it's important to bring up that at the last county meeting, this is being talked about on a legislative level, that they're looking
to change the
law
right,
to require it to be done within that 90 days.
right.
So there's another county meeting coming up in December. I just registered for that today. I'm hoping that I will be able to make it. So they should have another legislative update at that point. So I think to Mrs. Jaffe's point is the way the law stands now, you have your first full year of your first term, but best practice would say sooner is better, so you can understand the process that we're doing here, because the ramp up time is kind of big.
But again, this language also came out from what we learned at workshop. This is the recommendation the NJSBA has made, and we know the NJSBA is a guidance service right, that we are provided as board members. They are not God, they are not the legislators, but they are a valuable tool. And then the other thing we wanted to change in 0144 is that second paragraph, to also include after the word policy manual to add Robert's Rules of Order latest edition. And again, coming out of workshop, this is something that we're taking and applying to our policy changes, and that Robert's Rule of Order is our, for lack of a better term, Bible, or whatever religious book that you choose. That is what we use to guide the way our meetings are run.
If
This
the,
is swearing book.
if that policy, if the wording is indeed encouraged, then I can get behind it, but yes.
Thank you. And yes, and feedback, the whole point of going through these in public is that we are soliciting feedback. 0155 was our next policy. And again, this is like heavy stuff. It's not thrilling to talk about, but it's incredibly important. These policies are what guide everything that happens in this district. This meeting was very long, so my apologies if I'm long-winded. I'm learning from Reese. 0155 is discussion of committees. We wanted to change the names of the committees. And again, that's in our policy agenda, changing the names to, it was in the agenda, wasn't it? Yes, because it was down here. Finance, buildings and grounds was the same, taking curriculum and special education and changing that to education/student achievement. Again, that came directly out of workshop. And then co-curricular/athletics, removing the community relations or community resources committee altogether, because we're finding that it really just overlaps with everything else. Although it's always good to get a second set of eyes because a lot of these do overlap, but replacing that with the governance and policy committee. And then additionally, making sure that we are following the policy and assigning a chairperson for each committee who is responsible for reporting out, taking the notes, and submitting those notes to board members as well. So they have all the information that they need in order to make informed decisions on resolutions. The next one we looked at was 0164, conduct at board meetings. We needed to change the order of business in that policy to reflect the order of business that we conduct at our meetings, because it was outdated. So we made those changes, and also to reflect Robert's Rules of Order Edition 12, order of business. And then 5120 was our next policy that we discussed. And this policy is just on hold right now. We're waiting for consultation with Strauss Esme. We should have the answers by next week. The idea of this policy is around homeschool, like when people move to town, what their homeschool is, or when they have children, they've been in town, what their homeschool is. And we want clearly defined parameters on how those decisions are made, whether students go to their homeschool or the superintendent's discretion to send them to an alternative school in town within the 2 miles. And there was language changes like pupils, all policies that say pupils need to be changed to students, and then removing some language, adding a class size cap and a move-in date cutoff. And I know Mr. Cruz had discussed that, not at last meeting, but the meeting prior to that. And then the next policy that we discussed was 2313, which will just defer to policy 5120. 2313 policy is the policy on class size. And that will be clearly outlined in 5120.
Can I just interrupt? 5120 currently exists in our
Yes.
policy manual.
Yes.
Giving the superintendent that latitude,
Yes.
it's just very muddy.
Mhm.
So we're just really
It's
defining
very vague.
the
Yeah.
parameters around,
Yeah.
what constitutes a change in the homeschool.
Right. And again, we're working with Strauss Esme to make sure that language is just right. And then the last one 7250. We went to the policy that did not pass last time, and we took out the paragraph about limiting the award to outside of someone's lifetime, which was back to the original first reading that we had. The second reading is where the policy died. So we're going back to that language, which I believe was submitted in 927. It might have been the meeting before the 927. And that will be the policy that you see on the next agenda for another first reading. We are starting back from scratch, first reading. And that was it. Any feedback or questions?
You guys did a good job. Yeah, I think you guys really did.
Thank you. It was a
did
very
good
long meeting, but I think we realized that like it really, we need to flesh out these discussions. We really need to comb through this through a fine tooth comb. It's going to take a long time, but if it's done systematically, the idea and like and cyclically, you know, like this is not done, you know. It's not like, okay, we got to, you know, the 8,000s, we're all done now, and then we start all the way back at the beginning and go through them again as needed. Eventually, we're gonna get to a point where we don't have to do this because we've done this quite a few times and the language is just right. But again, you know, to the board, as you're going through the policies, you know, as many eyes as possible, recommend them to us, and that will be added in, even if it's not in that 2000s, 3000s, so on and so forth.
You guys changed the horse policy that Diana was telling us about?
No, we're keeping the horses.
Or keeping that all right? Very good.
So one thing that I learned.
It's
as
your
a
pony.
takeaway, I'm entering my 9th year as a board member. I never knew that there was a private portal login for board members to go into policy. So that will be sent out to all the board members. So, because we've always been looking at the
public view,
public
yeah.
view, and it will give us a little bit more insight and options on what language is out there. So
Yeah.
we'll be able to better. do
It does take a little while though, because they'll fax us forms that you have to sign and send back, and then they give you a password.
Yeah, but I mean, shocking, 9 years in, I'm still learning stuff.
Yeah, I've
And
tried to
then,
do. I've been going in and making changes all the time. You know, we know what you guys say.
That's right. And then Ms. Giuseppe is meeting with Mr. Phil Nicastro, and he is the rep from Strauss Esme to talk about that class size policy. So as Ms. Strappi said, you know, we're getting input and help doing that. So it was really a really beneficial long meeting.
Well, thank you for your time and going through all that, because it is, I could tell it was a lot of fun, and we did miss the volleyball for that great stuff. So.
That's right. I missed.
But it's important stuff. That's what we do, policy. So
Yeah, and just real quick, 2 things. Number one, if I could find out where to look at board policy, public view, whatever works, 100%. And also just if there's a way to get like more student eyes on it, like in the future, of course, maybe just form a small group of students, like 5 to 6, to go through it as well and get.
I
on
love
those.
that idea. And, you know, you have to think like, you know, and that's a great conversation to have with your principal as well. Like, who is that part of student council responsibility? Or should this be a second group of students? And I also would add to that it's incredibly beneficial for teachers to get really adept at finding policies that directly affect them, administrators that directly affect them. I think it's a little bit of a culture change. I think in all districts.
It's a welcome culture change.
Yeah, but I think it will, if the more knowledgeable that everyone is on our policies that guide the everyday of our district, or the umbrella that guide the everyday of our district, I think the better.
It's the backbone. It's what we should be asking whenever a question, comment, when anything comes up, is what is our policy on that? So I think having this committee and starting to dig into this work is going to bring everybody's focus, because at the end of the day, as Board of Education, we hire a superintendent and we create policy. So I think it's, you know, really good news going forward.
I
Yes,
just want
can go
to,
over that. I can go over the policies with you, show
Yeah,
you where
that's
to
great.
find them.
Yeah.
Because there is a differentiation between policy versus regulation.
right.
I can go over all that with you.
That would be fantastic.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I apologize because in creating my meeting notes that I share with the board, I should have shared them with you. And, you know, I remove anything that's confidential from them. So because it's a document. So I'll make sure to share those with you going forward. So you have advanced knowledge of them as well and the committee agendas as well.
That would be
Sorry about
fantastic. That's all right. Thank you so much.
I think that's it on committee reports. So at this point, we could open to public comments on agenda action items. So if anybody has any comments on what we're voting on tonight, please come up to the podium. No. I see nobody, so we are going to close public comments and move on to discussion items, which would be any old or new business. Does anybody have anything else they want to add? The only thing that I want to add to old or new business is we did have a resident ask a question last meeting regarding the RFPs for the attorney and the architect on record. And we did say that we would look into that just to verify that we were within our right to do that. And we are. We did check with legal department. We checked with New Jersey school boards, and no multiple year contracts are permitted to be awarded. And a board is permitted to go out to an RFP for any professional service at any time. So you can change your attorney, you can change your auditor. You do that as you see fit. So I just wanted to clarify that for the board and for the public.
When's our new lawyer start?
December 1st.
Perfect, thank you.
And if there's no other discussion
I'm
items.
sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So the law department that you were talking about, that was NJSBA
That
that
was
you,
New Jersey school boards and Ms. Giuseppe reached out to an attorney as well.
Yeah, to the new board attorney.
oh, okay. Okay, so we had the new board attorney look at it and
Yeah, we looked at the meeting.
NJSBA
Yep.
board. So the NJSBA legal department, that's a service that we already pay for, right?
That's
But that's
included
like
in our
as
membership, and
needed.
It's called the attorney of the day.
Okay.
And you can submit any question, and I actually got replies from 2 separate attorneys.
Oh, okay.
With the same information saying that you absolutely could do an RFP and change any professional service at any time.
Is there like a limit? Like, are they like, you only get 2 a month? They're like.
They didn't say there was a limit. We don't want that reputation, though. to keep changing. So I did want to clarify that. So from here, we're going to move on to the roll call on resolution. So this will be the new format. So if it's funky, I'm asking forgiveness up front. So we have resolution number 1, which is approving the minutes from the October 27th, 2022. I need a motion to accept resolution number 1.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Drappi.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Prisco. And can we do a roll call, Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi.
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco.
Yes.
And Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Okay, so our next bundle is personnel. And I need a motion to approve resolutions number 2 through 2.2. And it involves new hires and resignation.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Drappi,
Second.
second by Mr. Day. Any discussion? If not, Mr. Cruz, can we please do a roll call?
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Okay, the next batch is education. And I need a motion to approve resolutions number 3 and 4.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Prisco,
Second.
second by Mr. Day. Is there any discussion?
This is really ridiculous, but I'm shocked that they're going to Poconos in January. For me, it's like, it's cold.
June.
Oh, it says June. I'm sorry. I thought she said January before.
No.
And that's why I was like, why?
June 2nd.
June. Yeah, June. Okay, yeah.
Short.
I noticed that as well.
Yeah, I just want to,
Long word.
and I want to congrats Mrs. Kleinick and DeFaro on the Beefy grant, $5,000
Yeah.
for the Learning Fund vocabulary, so. You're awesome. Beefy's a great organization, so keep donating to Beefy.
If there's no further discussion, can we please do a roll call, Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes,
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Okay, our next bucket is special education, and I need a motion to approve resolutions number 5 through 5.2.
so moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Day, second by Mrs. Drappi. Is there any discussion? If not, Mr. Cruz, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes,
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Okay, our next bucket is athletics co-curricular. I need a motion to approve resolutions number 6 and 7.
so moved.
Moved by Mr. Day,
Second.
second by Mrs. Drappi. And is there any discussion? If no discussion, Mr. Cruz, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes,
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
and Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed. Thank you.
Okay, and last bucket, we have finance. So I need a motion to approve resolutions 8 and 9.
so moved.
Moved by Mr. Day,
Second.
second by Mrs. Drappi. Is there any discussion?
This new format is painful, but no discussion.
Luckily, you only have 2 more meetings, so.
I love this new format.
Yeah,
I love it.
good for you.
Well,
Yeah.
it is good for me. It's good for Verona, Jim.
It's good for Verona.
It's actually good for all.
Is there any discussion?
I mean,
It is a fun meeting. If there's no discussion, Mr. Cruz, can you please call the roll on that?
Sure. Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
yes,
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed. Thank you.
Okay, and at this point, we are going to move on to public comments on any topic that you want to bring up. And I just want to, like, as somebody's approaching the podium, say good luck to all the candidates. The polls closed a half an hour ago, so results are going to be rolling in, and it's exciting for the town.
Hi, Denise Rosella, 130 Percival Avenue. 2 quick things. One, I actually agree with Mr. Walker. I like this new format on voting. I think it encourages more discussion on the individual items that you're voting on, and I think it actually makes board members think more about each individual item instead of just voting for one full slate. So though it may be a little bit more time consuming, I think that the results at the end may be better. Okay, I have a really nerdy question, and I'm really sorry, but it's just something that I noticed, and Chris is rolling his eyes. This is like the attendance, like how many people are in each grade, in each school and stuff. And this is for September, so this is for the new school year. And it said that we had 162 new students at the high school. And of course, my first thought was, well, yeah, those are the middle school kids that moved up. But then when you look at HBW, it says we only have 21 new students. So that cannot be all the 5th graders, the new 5th graders. So do we know how these numbers are kind of calculated? I mean, like I said, it's a really nerdy.
That's a great question, and it's funny because I talked to Mr. Cruz about this tonight. I'm not sure, I'm learning, and this is not a form I've really delved into, but peeking at it tonight, I'm like, I have to look into this, so yes.
Guess. I think that elementary technically is pre-K through 8.
It is,
And I
yes.
think that high school is technically 9 through 12, so I
Yes.
think that's why you'd see a gap in that particular. I could be very wrong, but that's my gut.
And it's interesting because I did actually go back and look at last year's because I guess I'm a real big nerd. And the numbers are about the same. So it's a consistent, whatever it is consistent. I just was really kind of interested in how these numbers were created. And that's really it. So thank you.
We will get back to you on. that.
Yeah, more to come.
Stand by. Is there any other public comments? So if not, we will officially close the public comment portion of the meeting. Our next public meeting is Tuesday, November 22nd. And that will begin with confidential session at 6 with our public session at 7 PM here at the high school Learning Commons. And I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mrs. Drappi, second by Mr. Day. And I need a verbal all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed. And it is 8:37. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.